Welcome to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. I am your host, Molly Southgate, and today I'm interviewing
Anthony Ianni.
Hi there. How are you today?
I'm good, Molly. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to chat with you today. So can you tell me a little about your book?
Yeah, so my book title, Centered Autism, Basketball, One Athlete's Dreams. It's basically about my life story. Growing up from when I was diagnosed with autism at age 4 to being told by doctors and specialists that I would barely succeed at anything in life because of my autism, to transitioning in elementary, middle school, and high school, and then in my college days at Grand Valley State and becoming the first Division I college basketball player with autism later on for Michigan State University, and also earning my bachelor's degree in sociology in the process to where I'm at today. And so basically it's a book, Molly, where number one, like I want to educate people about what autism really is, because I put some things in the book that, you know, a lot of people in the autism community can relate to, and a lot of families and educators can really learn from as well. But I think the other thing was I just really wanted to tell people, you know, my story and just getting it out there for the entire world to see.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about that. And like, how did you get to the place knowing that like you wanted to write about your life? And you talk about every aspect and a lot of stuff about like how the school system deals with autism and how like sports deals with that and all that stuff. Right. And those are important stories to tell. How did you get to the place that you wanted to say that?
So it was really a lot of people, you know, especially educators and administrators kind of getting in my ear about it. So I do a lot of motivational speaking around the country, around the state of Michigan. And I was speaking at a middle school in Macomb County, Michigan, about 6-7 years ago. And when I got done, the principal came up to me and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about, you know, writing a book, putting your entire life story into print?" And I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm so busy being on the road at least 5 days a week. Like, I don't know if I have time to even do it. And so, so that's when, you know, another administrator told me the same thing. And then another, and I had another say, you know, if you do a book, you know, not only will your story get out there, but our students will get to hear and see more of your story. And it really could take your career to another level that you never go to. And so I talked to a few people, you know, a few years later, and then my middle school resource room teacher, she hooked me up with her husband's cousin, Rob Keast, who helped me, you know, co-author the book. And Rob and I just instantly clicked right away. You know, we talked about the goals we had in mind for the book. We talked about things we wanted in the books and the things we didn't want in the book. And we just communicated so well, and we just bounced different ideas off each other that worked. And if there were things we didn't agree upon, you know, we didn't agree upon it together. It's not like, you know, one guy went one way and the other went the other. So, but that's kind of how it all started, just kind of people getting in my ear about it. And, you know, for me to finally put my entire life story in print, I mean, it's exciting. And I'm really excited to see, you know, how a lot of people read it and what they think about it.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And it really is such an excellent book. And it's like, I personally don't know a lot about sports, but reading it, that's not what the whole book is about. Like, it's about really your journey and your life and like how other people can like pretty much like do better about like helping people that they know with autism or people that have autism with this. And it's so, so excellent. I'm so glad that you wrote this. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like working with the co-writer on a story about your life? Like, I can imagine that would be a little bit hard. I mean, at least I know that I would have some trepidations working with someone else about something so personal.
You know, at first, Molly, like, you know, it was interesting because Rob and I had never met each other before up until we got introduced and we talked over the phone. And then when we finally met in person, obviously, this was 2 years before the pandemic. When we first met face to face, that's when I was like, okay, like, yeah, I got a good vibe with Rob. You know, I really like what he's saying, and he graduated in journalism from Michigan State University too, so he understood, you know, Michigan State because we both were from it's a same alma mater, mm-hmm. and he knows people who are authors. He's know people who worked in the author and the book field, so he had a lot of great resources to help us get to the potential we needed to make this book great. And he and I sat down and did like 5-6 interviews that were like 2-3 hours each. And, you know, it wasn't just me he interviewed. He asked my mom and dad questions. He asked my sister questions too. And, when, he started putting it together, he would always, we would just bounce ideas off each other back and forth. And like I said, if there were things we wanted to put in there, we talked about it and asked, why does it make sense putting it in the book? And a good example is, so when he talked to my mom, obviously my mom, the great mom she is, she still has the stacks and files of paperwork from my IEP meetings, my individualized education plan meetings. And in those notes are evaluations on me in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and so on and so forth, all the way to, sixth grade. And so I didn't start going to my IEP meetings till like I was in sixth grade. So I didn't know what an IEP meeting was during that time. And Rob had talked to my mom and he got a hold of those evaluation, notes. And then he called me and said, hey, what do you think about putting your IEP evaluations in this book? And I was like, I don't know, because there's some things in there that are very personal to me and like, moments I'm not very proud of or fond of because, just how I was at such a young age, that things that was just out of my control at that time. And I told him, I said, I don't know if I want them in there. And then Rob instantly said to me, he said, well, think of this. Don't think of what's best for you, the author. Think of what's best for you, for your readers, because you're going to have parents and educators who see these evaluation notes and go, you know what? My student or son or daughter was in the exact same spot as Anthony Ianni was in first grade or second grade. So, and look where he's at today. So the purpose of having these in this book is to give those people hope. And that's what this book is about, is to give people hope and inspiration that they need. And he's like, don't make a decision right now. Just kind of sleep on it, and let me know tomorrow morning. Honestly, Molly, like after he told me that, I didn't even need 2 hours to think. Like I called him back an hour later and I said, okay, let's do this. Cause you're right. It's not about what's best for me. It's about what's best for our readers. And so just having conversations like that, it really showed me like how great of a relationship we have. I mean, and we're starting, working on our second project now, and we're very excited about that. I'm not going to get into much detail. We'll share down.
That's so exciting.
Yeah. And so we're very excited, but that just tells you, how great our relationship has been. And it wasn't just a partnership, Molly, between co-authors. It actually developed into a friendship, which made it even better as well.
I love that so much. And it really does come across in the book that like you had a very close relationship, because there were parts where I was like, wait, he really had a co-author for this, because it feels so personal and it feels like a friend wrote it, I also really love that story you told, how you just were like, nope, it has to be what's best for the readers. Mm-hmm. And that's so important, because a lot of times you read books and books like this too, and it's like, it's only for the author, and here it's not. And it's so important to have those kind of messages put out there for people that could be struggling with these things.
Exactly. And that's part of the reason why, like, I wanted to do this, was because, I when it comes to, my speaking career, I do multiple topics. I do bullying. I do transitioning in life with autism. I do leadership talks with sports teams. So I do a various different amount of topics. And when it comes to the bullying piece, like, I wanted to show a lot of the students I talked to around the state of Michigan, around the country too, that, you don't just hear like 2 bullying stories in my presentations from my life. Like, in the whole book, like, you get to read more than that. And I wanted, students, especially middle school and on up, to see that too. And so, and that was another big reason why, like, I did this story, was because I didn't just want to, like you said, like, it's not just a sports story. Like, it's more than that. It's an autism story. It's a bullying story. It's a transitioning in life story. And I think that's why, when I first started talking about the project with Rob, and then we were talking about after that, the one thing we talked about and really wanted to hit home was, we want to hit this for multiple audiences. We didn't want to just make this a one type of audience book. We wanted to hit multiple audiences for this to be, covered all over, not just the country, but maybe international as well.
Yeah. And it very much is also like a coming of age story too, because it literally is, because it's about your life and growing up. But I love that element of it too, where you talk about like standing up to the bullies as you got older, and like learning more about like what was actually going on. Like, that was something in the book that was so heartbreaking, especially early on, when you're hearing about like the things that they would say, and like the moments where you really realized that they were really bullying you. But it's also so inspirational how you would stand up against that. And now you do talks about that, telling your story. I kind of want to talk about your public speaking a little bit. Can you tell me about how you got started doing that?
Yeah. So long story short, it was actually Brian Calley, who was the lieutenant governor at the time, 9 years ago. And MLive.com, which is like one of the biggest news sites we have in the state of Michigan, they had wrote an article about me my senior year at Michigan State about being on the autism spectrum. And it was actually kind of the first time ever that my story had gone public. And I didn't know how people were going to react to it. I didn't know how our fan base was going to react to it. And it actually got quite a great reaction. You know, a lot of people really loved it, and it went all over the country. And so Brian had heard about my story. And at the time, Brian was trying to get a legislation bill passed for insurance companies to help families with autism, you know, cover, you know, their treatments and ABA therapies and doctor's appointments. And so Brian was able to get it passed in April, you know, during Autism Awareness Month. But before all that took place, Brian's office had called me like a week before our season ended, and they asked me if I want to speak at an autism gala in Detroit later that spring. And I was like, yep. I said, let me get to the end of the basketball season. You know, I would like to win a national championship before I make any decisions. And then I'll let you guys know. So obviously we came up short. We lost in the Sweet 16 in the NCAA tournament. And then not even a week went by. I told my mom, I said, yeah, let's take this opportunity. Let's see. But because Molly, that was also a time period in my life, like every other senior in college. What am I going to do with my life? Where am I going to go? Like, what's my purpose going to be? And you know, I had an idea that I wanted to be in athletic administration, sports administration for college athletics, because my dad worked in college athletics for almost 40 years, 26 of those in Michigan State. So I wanted to have those same opportunities that I had growing up to give my kids someday. And so I get to the gala in Detroit. It was hosted by DTE, which is a big energy company. And so I get there. My mom and dad are there. My wife, girlfriend at the time, my sister and brother-in-law are there. And I did like a 9-10 minute speech, got a great reaction, ovation to it. And I got in my car with my wife, and I'm driving her home. And I said, you know what? I think I know what I'm supposed to do in my life now. And she asked me, well, what do you mean? I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, other than Dr. Temple Grandin, who's one of the most famous individuals in the world with autism, I said, name me somebody like that who's a big hero, role model, and icon that people in the autism community look up to. I said, name me somebody else besides her. And my wife just sat there in silence. She couldn't name anybody. And that's when I looked at her and I said, you know what? I'm going to go be that guy. I'm going to go be that hero, that inspiration, and that leader that people in the autism community can look up to. I'm going to go be that guy. And so that's how it all started. And I've never looked back ever since. And then 8 years ago in 2013, I started my own nationwide initiative called the Relentless Tour, which is aimed toward anti-bullying and autism awareness altogether. And it's just been great. And so, but without Brian Calley's support, without him giving me that phone call saying, hey, I want you to come speak to this autism gala, like, I really don't think you and I are having this conversation right now. And I don't think Centered is being written or on the market, if you will.
I love that, all of that so much, but especially what you were just saying about how you're like, I'm going to be that. Because I don't say much on the podcast, but I talk like with my family and like people that know me, I talk about that a lot, where it's like, if you don't have something, or if there's something missing from a community you're a part of, go and be that. Right. And it's just so amazing to hear someone say that has become that, and that has succeeded in like that sort of mission to go and like be what's lacking there. It's amazing. Yeah. I'm really just like in awe right now. So were there any skills from public speaking that translated over to your writing?
Oh man. I think for me, the passion I have, for what I do. And, one of the things I told Rob was, I really wanted to take my passion for inspiring people, and I really wanted to put it into the book as much as possible. And because the one thing that I've always told students, Molly, is, especially seniors in high school who are about to move on to college, I always tell them, if you want to be great, whatever you do in your life, you do it for two reasons. You do it with a passion and you do it with a purpose. And I always tell students, if you have those two things in your life, you can go on in your life and be great at whatever you want to be great at in life. And so those are the two things I have when it comes to speaking, is passion and purpose. And I told Rob, I said, I want to make sure that there's plenty of passion in this book, and I want to make sure this book has a purpose. And we were able to hit, not one, but two major home runs, with both those things. And so that's definitely, I could say definitely one of the biggest things I've taken from my speaking career is I want to make sure that I brought my passion for inspiring people over to the writing world as well. It
does come across in the book, and you can tell like how passionate you are about education and about like teaching people and about like public speaking and sports and so many different areas. Like you can really see the passion, which is so important because like
it is.
You can tell when a book doesn't have that, and this had it for sure.
Thank you.
So were there any parts of this book that were harder to write than others?
I think, again, just going back to the stories that I was not very proud of or excited of, the obviously the IEP evaluations were one of them. I think the other thing is like, telling stories about, things that went behind the scenes at Michigan State, in the locker room or with some teammates and whatnot. And I think that was probably the toughest part because, a lot of our fan base doesn't really know what happens behind the scenes or what goes on behind the scenes. And so, I was talking to a couple of teammates about this about a couple of years ago, and they applauded me because it's not easy, putting things in writing and telling stories that you don't want to tell. Yeah. And that was the most difficult part for me, was just telling those stories or even kind of like reflecting back, so for example, I don't want to give too much away, but when I was in 6th grade, I was a big Three Stooges fan. I loved, imitating Curly, doing all the sound effects and noises. And, I talked about how I tried to do all those impressions in front of everybody in 6th grade because I wanted to be the cool kid. I wanted to be the funny kid. But at that time, I didn't realize that I was being laughed at. I wasn't being, people weren't laughing with me. They were laughing at me. And it took me some time in my life to realize that. And so when Rob and I were talking about that story, we're talking about that together, it kind of gave me that sick feeling in the pit of my stomach, just that feeling you get when you feel like your stomach is in knots, like or something just does not feel right. That's the feeling I had, because those are days I don't like living and reflecting on, because, I was hurt a lot back in those days as a young kid. I was bullied a lot. I was teased a lot. I was disrespected a lot. And those are things like I have a tough time talking about. But when it comes to like wanting to tell them to other people, whether it's students or parents or teachers, like it's that passion and purpose that reminds me that, hey, like, again, this isn't about you. This is about making sure you inspire the other people around you. So definitely just trying to go back and, reflect on those stories and put them in print. I mean, those were definitely that was definitely the toughest part about writing the book as well.
And reading that, it was like, it's so heartbreaking to think that someone would do that to a kid. Like there were so many things in this book where you talk about like some of your evaluations and stuff and like what people would tell you. It's like, how could someone say that? Right. But it was so important to read, and like reading it, it felt like, oh, wow, that wasn't even something that was on my radar that someone would do that. And it's really important to have those stories told.
It really is, because you want to be able to show your reader that, you can relate to the author, or the reader can relate to the author, and that was the one thing I wanted this book, and Rob and I talked about wanting this book to have, was that we wanted pieces where people can relate to those situations where they've been bullied, where they've been doubted, where they've been teased. And so again, like the purpose was to hit home for those folks who needed the hope and inspiration, and to show them that, I've been in your shoes before and I know what it's like, and you're not alone.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And that brings it back to what you were saying earlier, like how it was like these stories, it may be uncomfortable to say, but like you have to say them. And like you're helping the reader by saying them.
Right. Absolutely.
So what do you think that like, and this is kind of a loaded question, but what do you think like sports and like schools and even just individual people can do in the future to make things more accessible?
Definitely educate yourself, for sure. And that's always going to be my answer, no matter what, is that the more we learn about other people who are dealing with certain different issues, the more we educate ourselves about those issues and diagnosis, the more we'll be better at helping that individual out. So a good example, about a year or two after I graduated from Michigan State, our assistant basketball coach, Dane Fife, who's now the head assistant coach at Indiana University, where he played in college, he had me in his office one day and we were just talking. And then he started asking me questions about, what worked with me and the coaches being on the autism spectrum, what didn't work, what were things that made me click, what didn't make me click. And I asked Coach Fife, I said, Coach, how come you're asking me these questions now? He said, well, Anthony, I'm going to be in coaching for a long time. And so if I ever recruit a kid and I find out that they have autism, like I want to be prepared on my end to make sure that I tell this kid, hey, we had a young man named Anthony Ianni, at Michigan State. I coached him who also had autism. And these were the things that worked for him. And these are some of the things that could work for you if you come play for us. So my assistant coaches were educating themselves even more because they want to be prepared for those situations in case it ever happened again. Because Molly, like I don't intend to be the first or the last person with autism to play a major college sport. Like there's going to be others down the road. I mean, there's already been some at the professional level. I mean, Armani Williams, who wrote a blurb for my book in an endorsement, he's the first NASCAR race car driver with autism in history. And so and Walker Rude, who's going to be in our second project, he was the first ACHA Division I hockey player in history at Davenport University. So, and Jordan Schwalger, who's a semi-professional basketball player in Australia. I mean, so there's a lot of great people out there on the autism spectrum that are about to do incredible things in athletics. And so, but a lot of these coaches are trying to prepare themselves for that. And so I've always told educators, schools, sports coaches, and just, parents, always continue to educate yourself, because the more you educate yourself and the more you know, the more you're going to end up helping that person with whatever situation he or she goes through in their life.
That is awesome. Yeah. And as an individual, I'm trying to get more educated, and I hope that everyone else will. And people, I really hope people will read this book and have this as a step on their life to get more educated about these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that was actually all the questions I had for you today. I just have one more, and that is, what do you have coming up?
Oh man. Well, obviously, Center is going to be released September 7th. So I'm excited about that. I had my first ever book signing at Pro Sports Zone at Laurel Park Mall here in Livonia, where I live.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very excited about that. And then other than that, I'll be speaking back on the road again this upcoming week for the first time since March 11, 2020. So I'm very excited to start doing in-person presentations around the state of Michigan and around the country. So, and obviously just promoting the heck out of this book and getting it out there so people can read it, and hopefully they get a lot of hope and inspiration from it.
Well, good luck with all of those things. If you want to come back on for your next project,
absolutely,
you're welcome.
I would love to.
On, of course. Thank you so much for coming on today. And anyone listening to this, go and read Centered, because by the time this episode is aired, it will have been released. All right. Well, thank you so much once again for Read Between the Lines. My name is Molly Southgate.
And I'm Anthony Ianni.
Let's end this the way all great stories end. Happily ever after. The end.
Thank you for listening to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. This episode is hosted by Molly Southgate. It is edited by Rob Southgate and produced by Southgate Media Group. You can get in touch with the show at readbetweenthelines@gmail.com, or you can send us a voicemail at 708-887-9473. That was 708-887-9473. You can also find us on Instagram at Read Between the Lines Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.